Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the April My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. For this layout, I started out with one of the cut files that My Creative Scrapbook subscribers have access to each month. For this layout, I did something a little bit different, for me anyway, with the cut file. I cut it out with the inner cuts. I cut it out again 2 more times without the inner cuts, once out of white cardstock and once out of one of the pattern papers in the collection. Using some gel glue, I glued the pattern paper cut file down to the cardstock cut file, and now I'm putting some glue on the regular cut file with all of the inner cuts. Once I apply a thin layer of gel glue to the cut file with the inner cuts, I place that on top of the other cut files that I glued together. That was a very easy way to back a cut file. I make sure that that outline is correctly positioned before the glue dries. Then I add all of the inside pieces for the letters to the cut file. Sometimes I find those little pieces to be hard to keep track of, so I like to get those attached down to the cut file as soon as possible. Sometimes I will place those little pieces in a plastic bag for safekeeping, but the safest thing is to have them attached down. In the April kit, we received a number of papers and embellishments from the Simple Stories Simple Vintage Life in Bloom collection. This is one of those really pretty Simple Stories collections that has lots of florals in it. The whole collection was super pretty, just my taste. This particular piece of pattern paper has a beautiful wreath on it. I thought that I would cut out the center and then fussy cut all the way around on the inner part of the wreath. The background color on this piece of paper is a very pale greenish blue. I left a small border of that color when I cut around the leaves on the wreath, just so that there would be a little bit of contrast between the wreath and the background that I'm going to put behind it. I wasn't sure if I also wanted to fussy cut around the outside of the wreath, but I finally decided that I was going to leave the paper the way it was because I really liked the blue background, and I'm putting this pink piece of pattern paper behind the wreath. I turned both pieces of paper over. I layered the wreath on top of the pink paper, and then I took a pencil and I traced along the inside. I want to cut out a piece of pink paper that's the correct size to cover the opening in the paper that has the wreath, but I don't want to have none of that pink paper. The reason for that is I have made the mistake so many times in a situation like this of just attaching the pink paper behind the wreath paper and not saving any of the pink paper, and then needing just the smallest amount of that color paper, but I had already glued it down to the other paper. So now I know better, and I always try to reserve any paper that I know is just going to get covered up anyway. I used a couple of pieces of Scotch tape to attach the two papers together. I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget how they lined up, so I thought I would just tape the pink paper down while I had it positioned correctly on the other paper. These days, whenever I use a cut file, I stitch on it. I love the texture that that adds to the layout. So I used some white embroidery thread and I stitched all around the inside of all of the letters on the cut file. I knew that I was going to be stitching on the cut file. That's why I added that layer of white cardstock to the back of the cut file. When stitching on paper, it's always nice to have it reinforced so that the stitches don't pull through. At this point, I have my cut file positioned on the background, and I'm adding some of these super pretty flowers. Often I look for opportunities to have elements on the layout contrast with each other so that they'll stand out. On this particular layout, though, I loved the way the blue flowers matched in with the wreath. I really love the colors of blue that are in the background paper and also in those dimensional flowers. So I thought that on this particular layout, the pattern paper and the flowers matching worked out really well. I did a lot of fussy cutting of the papers in this collection. I used Distress Oxide in peeled paint to ink the edges of a number of leaves that I cut out to incorporate into the wreath. I also fussy cut some really pretty butterflies. I'm going to have a number of larger and a few smaller butterflies on this layout. Here I'm using some heavy matte gel medium to attach the flowers down to the layout. The photo that I'm using in this layout was taken at the Muter Museum in Philadelphia. We've been there a few times, and you're not permitted to take pictures in most of the museum, but they have an outdoor area with a beautiful garden, and you're allowed to take photos out there. So this is one of those photos. My girls were sitting on a bench, and there were some large trees behind them, so I tried to take a picture to get the whole scene in. The museum has a lot of exhibits that have to do with anatomy and the history of medicine. And I don't think I would have guessed that I would have been super interested in that, but it is a really cool place to visit. And my girls really like it there too. When I placed the flowers down on the wreath, I used a little bit of foam and I popped up the pink flowers. The pink flowers were a little bit flatter than the other ones, and I wanted them, since they were in the center of the blue flowers, to have a little bit more dimension. Now that I have all the flowers in place, I'm adding in those fussy cut branches that I inked a little while ago. I am mainly clustering them around the outside of the flower clusters. I don't want to totally cover up the wreath. I think that it's beautiful. Like I said, I love the color of it, but I did want to add a little bit of emphasis to where I had the flower clusters, and I thought that this did the trick. I fussy cut out a lot of branches. I was thinking I might be able to use them on another layout, but it turned out that I used every last one of them on this layout. I really liked the way that they looked clustered around those flowers. Once I had them positioned, I used some Aleene's gel glue and I attached all of them down to the layout. I very rarely glue the leaves and the branches on my layouts all the way down. I usually just put a little bit of glue on the base and then tuck them into the flowers or behind other elements on the page. That allows them to lift up off the page a little bit, and that provides just a little bit of dimension that I really like. If you've been with me for a while, you may know that it's very hard for me to create a flower cluster without adding these little branches in. My eye has gotten so used to seeing them that I feel that the clusters look incomplete without them. The die set that I use to cut these out is by Creative Expressions, and the name of the set is Holly Berries. I'm sure that if these are cut out of other colors, they would look great on a Christmas layout, but I find that when they're cut out of white paper, they could be used on any layout. This die set comes with 4 dies. There are 2 large ones facing in different directions, and then also 2 small ones facing in different directions. For this layout, I'm using the smaller dies. I try to vary the look of these die cuts by cutting them into smaller pieces and positioning them at different angles. That way they will not all look exactly the same on the layout. And once again, I'm using some gel glue to attach all of those down. Sometimes, to be absolutely sure that I have glued everything down on the layout, I will give the layout a little bit of a shake test. That lets me be aware of anything on the layout that I forgot to glue down. I have been known to do that at times, and then I'll find the embellishments all over the place rather than where they belong on the page, so I try to be careful about that. I had placed down a couple of butterflies earlier in the process just to see if I liked them. I added those larger butterflies back into the layout, and I added a couple more that I spread throughout the cut file. I love adding butterflies to layouts, and there were tons of them in this particular kit. Something that I love to do to the butterflies is add a little bit of foam to the wings and then add some adhesive to the center and press down on the center so that the wings will pop up a little bit. I just use very tiny pieces of adhesive foam to do that. On this layout, I pop up the wings of all of the butterflies on the page, not just the larger ones. Sometimes I'll just attach those very small butterflies right down to the layout, but I was in the mood to add lots of dimensions, so all of them got the foam on the back of them. I didn't include too many of them on this particular layout, but I love the way this kit came with the Simple Stories foam stickers. I really like those a lot because they have a nice amount of dimension and they also stick really well to the page. So for this layout, I picked out a whole bunch of little tiny foam hearts and I spread those all throughout the cut file. And of course, I have to add a little bit of bling to the layout. So I'm using some of these strips of very, very tiny jewels, and I'm adding them to the centers of all of the butterflies. The larger butterflies get 3 jewels, and the smaller ones get 2 jewels. These stickers are made by Angel's Crafts, and they are called stone stickers. I can use jewels like these on so many layouts because they're nice and sparkly, but they are very neutral in color. Next, I added some pearls to the flowers. I just wanted to add a little bit of something extra to them. I often use round pearls. I had some self-adhesive pink pearls on hand that I thought went well with these flowers, so I decided to use those. And I was actually pleasantly surprised at how well these pearls stuck to the Prima flowers. I used pink on the pink flowers, but then for the blue flowers, I used some tiny white pearls. I usually use pearls that are a little bit bigger than the ones I use on this layout. I think because there were so many flowers on the layout, I didn't want to overwhelm the layout with tons and tons of large pearls. So I thought that these smaller ones would be a good choice. And I probably don't need to put so many pearls on each flower, but I really love the look of the pearls and the texture that it brings to layouts, so I added quite a few. That was the very last touch to this layout, and here are some close-ups. This is the point in the video where I always say thank you for watching, and I just want you to know how sincere I am and how thankful I am for all of the views and the likes and the comments. I really appreciate it so much. Thank you, thank you. Please take a look in the description box where you'll find the link to the My Creative Scrapbook website. You could check out all of their beautiful current kits there and order a subscription if you would like. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.